Good morning. Say something, anything. Yes, I see. Good morning, folks. I see 3 of you online already. Good morning to you all. Hope you're okay. Type in any questions that you've got. We're going to discuss how we start the downswing today. And if you are just at home now, you can type in a message to let me know, is the Wi-Fi working okay? Is the picture clear enough? And can you hear me okay? Thank you. Good morning, folks. All right, it's 2 or 3 minutes past. Good morning, Mel. Morning, Neil. Is that better this morning? Fantastic. That's great. Give 1 or 2 more minutes. It's 2 minutes past now, and then we'll get started. Alrighty. Hi, Ian. Nice to see you. Alrighty, so we'll start with a little bit of philosophy this morning. One of my favourite books I've ever read, and one of my favourite quotes was by Arnold Palmer. With pleasure. That will get discussed today, and I will discuss the path of the hands, because that all links into how we start the downswing. It's something I'm going to cover in quite some detail anyway, so thank you for that. It's a bit of philosophy to start the day from Arnold Palmer, and it's from his book, Golf My Way, I think it's called, and I absolutely love it. So it's a lovely quote. Golf is deceptively simple and endlessly complicated. A child can play it well, and a grown man can never master it. Any single round of it is full of unexpected triumphs and perfect shots that end in disaster. It is almost a science, but we know it is a science, not the game, but certainly the swing. It is almost a science, yet it is also a puzzle without any answer. It is gratifying and tantalizing, precise and unpredictable. It requires complete concentration and total relaxation. And that's a point I'm going to come to very shortly. It satisfies the soul and frustrates the intellect. That's why we're all drawn to it, right? It is at the same time maddening and rewarding, and it's without doubt the greatest game mankind has ever invented. It's actually from his book called My Game and Yours, just remembered. So there we go, a bit of philosophy to start the day for you. And the next thing I want to do is just discuss the distance on the tour. It's obviously the hot topic over the weekend for the Masters. It's sort of, I don't think I've ever heard or seen so much noise and activity around the game needing to change because people don't think it's as interesting as it should be, or it's the right being played the right way. I think the problem is at the minute the golf courses just simply aren't long enough, and so they've got to do something. And there's a million different ways they can do that, all with good and bad sides to it. But just to give you an idea here, this is from Tiger Woods' book from 2 years ago. And so what he says is here, he's talking about Augusta. Augusta has over the years tried, this is Tiger Woods, by the way, one of the longest players of all time. Augusta has over the years tried to add yardage so that we would be hitting the same clubs as before into the greens. We might be hitting the same clubs, but they're going farther. An 8-iron doesn't go 150 anymore. Most guys hit an 8-iron 170 yards, and some hit it 180 or longer. It's remarkable, isn't it? It's a misnomer to say we're hitting the same clubs, therefore. It's true that the lofts are jacked up. So what it means by that is just de-lofted the clubs quite strongly, quite heavily. So an old-fashioned 8-iron is now more like a pitching wedge or a gap wedge. The 8-iron is more like a 7-iron or even a 6-iron. So he's taken a 2-club strength of the club lofts that they use, that we were using 20 years ago. We forget, Tiger's been around 23 years now. The irons were all delofted. Callaway made all their money early on by delofting all their clubs, and it was the first company to do that. Ping then followed suit, and now it's the same with every manufacturer. We're all hitting our irons longer, but not as much as most golfers would like to believe. We're hitting irons where the lofts aren't the same. As for me, I keep my irons old school. They're 2 degrees weaker from what standard is. 2 degrees weaker from standard on tour loft. That's incredible. Rory's wedge is 45 or even 44. My 9-iron is 45. So right there, I'm a club off the loft he uses. So he's already complaining. And he goes into a bit more detail in the book there, saying that there's no way why we should have the lofts so delofted. So even Tiger Woods is looking at it and saying, well, things aren't the same as they ought to be. Alrighty, so today Ian Chapman asked me how we start the downswing, and we're going to work on that. So the simplest way to say how we start the downswing really is that we should have built a correct setup. The hand should be correctly placed in the handle, and we should have widened ourselves into a big backswing position here. But we've covered all that in so much detail now over the past sessions that we need to sort of look at exactly how we start the downswing. And really, I was looking through all my pictures, and I was thinking, well, there's obviously a different downswing pattern for the irons than there is for the woods. If we look here, I have a fabulous photograph of McIlroy for you, and you can see those arrows. If you look where his hands are at the top of the swing, I think that arrow which the author has drawn there is perfect illustration for you, Mel. His hands have come very much down in that motion there. And that's because he's hitting a short iron. So, of course, his intention with the short iron, it is, just lower that screen this way. His intention with the short iron, the path of his hands, that once he got to the top of the swing up here, because he stood closer to the ball, it's a shorter club, and there's more of a downward swing with the club head with an iron, he has literally pulled his hands and arms down to the side of his body here and smashed that club that way into the ground. There's no way you do that with a driver, and I'll show you a picture shortly where the pros come from here and they come from more this angle here, more around themselves. So the intention of what they do on the downswing is relative to the shot they're hitting. Now, it'd be great if we could have one swing for all the different shots, but of course, our intentions have to be so different. So if we then look at one of my favorite pictures of all time, again, another author online. If we look there now, the hands are very much in front of the body on all those players. Look at Dustin Johnson. Look at Tiger Woods. I mean, that's a remarkable picture there of Tiger. So his hands have come from behind him to very much in front of him. So you've seen me show that picture before. With the driver along the club, they're standing further from the ball. So as they get to the top of the swing up here, they're not looking to bring their hands and arms down here because they get gummed up and stuck. That's afraid you hear the top pros talk all the time. I don't want to get stuck on the return of the ball. So for a lefty, for you, Ian, up to here, with the drive, the hands come around the body and in front of the body here. And that's where we get that very big explosive position on the way through, which I'll show you shortly. So the intention of the shot that you're hitting really determines the path of the hands. It also determines how you start the swing. Because we're going to try and put everything in sequence. So when I said a moment ago, how do we start the downswing? Well, I think the best way to start it, or to describe it, it's got to be softly and aggressively. So we're going to flip between the oldie worldie and the new world. Here is Lexi Thomson, who has a very unorthodox swing, but she bombs it. Now, Billy played with her out in the States, and she was equally as long as Billy back then. And that gap between the top Lady Tour pros and the sort of standard challenge tour pro like Billy is getting tighter and tighter all the time. Lady golfers are really getting there. So let's look at her action there. Big long swing, huge levers, left arm very high and upright. The next picture along. Now look at that. Look at the path of her hands and what's happened there. So her hands have dropped quite softly, but there's a huge amount of activity in her body. Oops. So look at the legs first of all. A lot of flex there, a lot of movement there. Her back leg is straightened up, her right leg is straightened. On the return to the ball, that right leg is pushing right up onto its toes, but the hands have dropped softly. So in terms of the sequence, what is the sequence of downswing? It's the body which is aggressive. We've got lots of activity in these huge muscles here, but the soft muscles, the slow muscles, are the hands. So as I get to the top here, I'm not looking to yank or pull the club. Pete Cowan, one of the world's top coaches, talks about the grab and close. He says most amateur golfers get to the top here because they grab the club. It has the effect. Watch this here. If I grab the club, watch the club face now. I'm in a neutral position there. So the club face and my left arm are flat to each other. If I grab, it shuts the face. I now got less loft on the face. So that grabbing action at the top there is very common. We've all done a bit of that, where you're trying to wallop the ball, but it shuts the face down. And that grabbing action can often lead to a very low pull over to the left. So if you have this soft sort of dropping action with the hands, but a yank of the body, then those two elements, whilst they seem contradictory, work very well together. Because we're going up the top to be soft with the hands, but aggressive with the body. Unfortunately, most amateur golfers are aggressive with the hands and soft with the body. And I count one of my old favourites, against the chicken wing, because the body hasn't moved. If the body is aggressive and it's moving and it's fluid, the hands and arms can drop into place to whip into place. And that's why one of the great drills of getting 4 clubs in your hands is great, because if you get to the top here, you can't grab and yank the club down because it weighs a bloody ton. So we go up to here, there's a soft dropping of the club downhill. The club's down to here, and then I'm turning with the body. So the true sequence of the downswing is once we've built this big, wide, spacious backswing here, get up to here, soft dropping of the hands and a yank of the body, an aggressive movement with the legs here. If the legs move around here, these weaker muscles, by weakening the legs, snap the club into place. So let me show you Lexi again here. Great position at the top there, unorthodox swing. And then she really just lets the hands and arms drop softly. You can even see there the hands are still quite close to her right side. And then watch the next photo. Now look at the legs. She has really snapped those legs up. Look at the rounding in the back. Now, most amateur golfers, if I showed a photograph of their back being that round, we get very vain and say, oh, no, it's horrible. My back's all slumped. I don't like that. I want to sort of stand. We really, on practice, it's not an athletic movement then. The pros arch their back dramatically on the way down. Why is that? Because they're pulling their hips back and they're extending their arms out to be as long as possible to create the widest lever possible. If your back is straight like that, it instantly narrows the arc because we'll pull the club too close to us. The pros really arch their back, and Nicholas was very famous for having a very rounded back when he hit the ball. And again, like I said to you last week, there's a difference between when we look at a photograph which is obviously static and motion. That's Lexi. I mean, really quite peculiar swing she has, really. Now, that wouldn't look particularly professional, that sort of flick of the hands there. And then sort of quite an ungainly, sort of awkward follow through, really. But the most important part is that when she's making that swing, she's doing what she knows works for her. So that's Lexi Thomson. Not a swing I particularly like, if I'm honest with you, but I admire it. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But she's very sort of awkward and sort of gangly. Now, here's the king. Now, if you want to understand the golf swing in its entirety, from the top and on the way down, look where his club shaft is on both those pitches. So the top of the backswing, that huge coil. And on the next picture, all the activity and aggression in the body. Look how his left leg has really yanked out of place, but that club shaft has barely moved. Look how in the picture at the top of the swing, we can see his back. We see all of his back. But he must have turned a good 45 degrees in the next frame. But look at the club. It's barely moved position. And that is remarkable. So that one photograph there, we see him fully coiled, got his back all the way around here, he's pulled all his right leg right behind him, and Arnold Palmer was famous for that. He had loads of photographs of him getting to a position here where his hip had disappeared, his right leg had disappeared, right thigh had disappeared on top of the swing, because he got himself all the way around. From this angle, he got himself into that position there. They've been doing it for years, tell us how to do it for years, and we've all bloody ignored them. Excuse my language. If you look at the Ledbetter videos, for years, loads of pros, that's Ledbetter, talk about maintaining this firm right leg and keeping resistance there. And the best players of all time were all swinging it right back in our plain sight. So let's look at Arnold again there. Club shaft to the top has barely moved, but that left leg has really pulled out of place. Now, the great phrase we're all using at the minute about this left heel here and this left heel here is he's putting the hammer down. And I love that phrase. So he's gone to the top of his swing. Now, Nicholas talked about it, Palmer talked about it, Tom Watson talked about it. They were absolute bombers of their time. Got to the top of the swing, and the left foot raises off the ground. The right side is pulled backwards. To initiate that downswing, Arnold's more or less left the club at the top there and stamped the left foot down. So he's put the hammer down. He has made the intention that the force is going downwards. So the club is pulled downwards as he pulls himself out of the way on the way through and snaps that club on the way through to create the rotation of the hands and arms in the swing. So as he's gotten to here, up, he's unwound, left the club at the top more or less, his hands are so soft, and then it snaps down his position. I absolutely love that photograph. It tells us absolutely everything. I mean, and what do you think the difference in timing there is? It 0.00 something of a second? It's absolutely nothing. Okay, so let's have a look now at John Rahm, how he does it. Because his swing is fascinating, really, because it's so short. So I'll put him on a little bit of a loop here now. So much power and energy. Short backswing, watch that. So what do you reckon he's starting his backswing, his downswing with? Watch his left foot now. He has that stamp. So let's see it again. Let's look where that stamp happens. It's rising now and stamp. So it's just before the club changes direction. Stamp there. So what you see there, I'll put that video on again, is an awful amount of fluidity. It's a lovely swing, that motion. He's got so much softness and fluidity in the aggressive movement he's got in his legs. There's no sort of rigidity there at all. So if he goes up the top of the swing here, the club sort of hangs at the top for a second as he unwinds on the way back, pulls his bum back this way because he stamped that left foot down. So working from the ground up, what did he do? He stamped the foot down, that took the weight from the toe to the heel. That then pulls the left leg backwards. It pulls the left foot cheek backwards. And as that happens, working upwards, we then have the hips uncoiling. It's not the hips at all, it's the thighs that are working there. And the softness in the hands then starts to really whip into the club head. And I believe it's called centripetal force or centripetal force. It's not centrifugal force. Is that as he unwinds and pulls, all that weight then gets transferred down into the club head. That's centripetal force or centrifugal force, however you pronounce it. And the club unwinding and snapping into the back of the ball and going all the way through. So he's done all the work with the body very aggressively and very fluidly. Bit of softness in the hands to drop him down his position. So again, let's have a look at, he's quite a thick-set man. Not particularly long levers, but just watch the fluidity. Once that stamp goes down, stamp, a massive coil all the way through. So Ian's made a comment there about the trail arm staying close to the body. And again, that's a funny thing. It was never called the trail arm. It was always called the right arm for years. And all of a sudden it became called the trail arm. So, there's Rory at the top. So his trail arm is his right arm. This one here. Next frame. There's no joke. That trail arm is close to the body. And look at it tucked in there again. Now that's a fascinating set of photographs. Look at his leg flex there. It's a leg flex there. All those forces running up the body. And again, look at that curvature in his spine. So in his sequence, top of the backswing there, bounces down. Look how he puts pressure right down. You can see much more flex in his knees as he pushes down. So Rory McIlroy's swing is definitely a downward motion. His hands have come very much down to his side, and then throw the hands in front of him, straighten the legs up, and really extend the hands out in front of him. If we take that to the sort of extreme degree. Again, one of my favorite photographs, like an explosion at impact. This is what it's all about at impact. He has absolutely jumped backwards to throw the club forwards. Again, quite a counterintuitive move on the thing. But all that motion of stamping the foot down, of pulling this side out of the way, dropping the hands softly, allows him to extend the hands and arms out to optimize power. So what's another great way of looking at that? Look for a second. It's the baseball. Now look at that for a sequence. There was so much about the baseball swing and the golf swing and the tennis swing which link so readily. If you go back to the, if you go to the finish position here, the penultimate picture just about there, look at the extension of his arms there. I mean, that's just a golf swing on a different plane, isn't it? So the big wind up here moves the left hip all the way back, the right hip all the way back, puts the bat above his head, creates leverage with his elbows and the club and the bat. Not a golf position, not a golf position, not a golf position. All of a sudden looking like a golf position, and that's a brilliant position, representative golf. And look at that for a follow through. So you can see there, look at the activity in his knees. Look at the activity in that right, I don't remember, what's he doing there? His left foot, like a golf swing. Look at that left foot there up off the ground, stamps it down and pulls his left side out of the way to snap that bat into position. And it's a great photograph there. Now, talk about being soft with the hands and the trail arm and the path of the hands, a question I've been asked already today, or links. There's Rory again from behind. So you can see picture one at the top of the swing. Picture two, he's maintained that angle, but look at the activity in his legs now. His legs are moving around, but he's keeping his hands quite soft to sort of just hang up there and then just drop into position relative to the amount of activity in the lower body. So the answer to the question is really, how do we start the downswing? We've got to build an excellent backswing, get ourselves in position here. The deeper we go up here, the more range that we have up here, how much easier is it to put the hands into a hitting position and snap around. If the swing is up here and a little short, you've not really got the range. So you know I like deep swing, deep body movement with high hands. If you're really trying to optimize your swing and swing like a pro, you get up here, that gives you all the room in the world to swing into. And the whole point about your backswing, this pulling back to the range, is to give you space to swing into on the return swing. So then we look at, say, someone like Furyk, with that weird, peculiar swing, Matt Wolff. How does he start his downswing? It's quite interesting there because his swing is constantly in motion. His club head's constantly in motion. If you look at Lexi and Arnold, who I showed you last week from above, that aerial photograph, he goes up, there's a definite pause at the top and a swing down. Most players get to the top, change direction and come down. Someone like Furyk and Wolff go up and around. There never seems to be a top of the backswing position. Yes, we can take photographs of it, but their club is in constant motion because they want to increase the range of the club head by making that huge loop all the way around and up. So there's no real start to their downswing as such because they're constantly in motion. Both of them are heavy left leg users. Matt Wolff particularly gets up the top of his swing up here, huge left motion up there, puts the hammer down. I love that phrase. That in turn pulls the leg upwards, put the forces upwards in the left leg and behind, which in turn, centrifugal force, spins that club into position. The hands, in your case, Mel, what you're asking there really is the plane or the path of the hands, always from the inside, never crossing over this way. And again, that links into what you just said there about the trail arm. If I get myself to here and bring my hands down like McIlroy did, and then bring them in front of me, I'm hitting from the inside, never throwing over. The hands never go forward. So if you've got a little habit of doing that, Mel, where you get to the top of the swing and you bring the hands forward, that club is feet out of position. So what's the best exercise for that? If you've got the time in your garden, get up, bring the hands down so they're in front of the body and the club shaft behind you, and then get the sensation of just turning that around a bit like a baseball. All right. So this is Jack in his prime. Look at his left leg. Now he looks like a giant there, Jack Nicklaus. I've met him. He's like 5 foot. Morning, George. Maybe okay. He's about 5'8", 5'9" now. He's certainly shrinking with time. But look at the activity in that left leg there, and look at that left foot. He is stamping that foot down. And there's so many conflicting elements to a golf swing. There's so many things to get right. But what Nicklaus has done there, as he's got at the top of the swing here, pulled himself backwards, got his hands very high, brought that left leg into play, because he knows when he stamps it down, it brings everything else into sequence. Now, on a more prosaic level, there's a very famous story about John Jacobs and Sam Snead. And John Jacobs was in a coaching conference with Sam Snead. John Jacobs was the #1 coach of all time, credited with Butch Harmon credits. John Jacobs has been his lead inspiration. Taught loads of great players, wrote loads of books, but kept it very simple. And they had a debate, and Snead says, you know, you've got to start the downswing with the legs. So there's no other way to do it. Let me find a picture of Snead doing that. We're going to put it here. So there's no other way. You've got to start the downswing with the legs. And Jacob says to him, well, that's not quite right, Sam. I respect you as a player, but there's lots of different ways of doing it. And Snead says, you've got to start it with the legs. Look at my legs. So we see Snead at the top of the swing, an incredibly elegant swing. What an athlete he was. Even at the age of 80, he could kick a door frame top. He then squats. He's very famous for his squatting action. So left heel off the ground, left leg very active, gets in that squatting position, and that pulls the club into position. If you then look at the relationship at the top of the swing between his left arm, his glove arm, and the shaft of the club, then the next picture, the middle picture there, that angle hasn't changed one bit. So he hasn't manipulated his hands one bit there. So what Snead has done is created an angle of 90 degrees between the shaft of the club and his left arm on the top. In your case, here, like that picture I put in the recorder the other day, right arm shaft of the club there. As he brought the club down, that angle hasn't changed an awful lot. But what has changed is left knee to this squatting position. He's very famous for his squatting position with Snead. And then on the return to hit the impact, his left leg will be absolutely straight. An incredibly athletic move. So him and John Jacobs was out of the debate. That's a little bit sort of testy. And Jacobs says, no, you can actually start the downswing just by using your hands. Snead says, you don't know what you're talking about, Jacobs. Sam was quite a braggart. So Jacob said to him, says, Sam, tell me, how far can you hit a golf ball off your knees? Oh, I hit about 250 off my knees. You watch me. He gets down his knees, makes a swing, bombed it out there. So Jacob says, oh, thanks for that, Sam. He said, how did you start that downswing with your legs when you couldn't use them? And of course, Snead sort of accepted them, the hands and arms could be used. Now, if we don't use the legs, we can generate an awful lot of distance with the hands and the arms. I see it all the time in the Soldier Young Course Foundation, get them swinging the club in a very different way where the hands really snap. So there's a tremendous amount of power and energy in the hands. And if you're struggling with balance or you're struggling with an injury, then there's no problem whatsoever with narrowing the stance and just swinging with the hands and the arms. But it doesn't optimize. Now, so many people I know from the last lockdown have said they loved doing this and they showed me the exercise. It's been quite funny watching them actually. All of a sudden, start to engage their legs. And again, it's a bit like when I talk about the world's top players. Sometimes we miss the most obvious sources of power. Alrighty, so are there any questions about what I've talked about there today? So I've been through quite a bit, really. I've shown you quite a lot today. If there's one thing that you should always take away from this, it is that movement there. It's aggressive with the body and soft with the hands. But let me just go back to that picture there of Rory, because there's a lot of about that which is of interest. That left leg movement in the picture of the pros, I reckon Elvis missed his vocation. Well, Gary Player claims that he taught Elvis to play golf on the strength of one picture of the two of them together. You can see from the picture it's a publicity shot or something. Again, so look at that arrow and look how his right arm is extending right down to the ball. That's a proper wedge hitting action there. You can see just how passive his legs are at the impact position there. So why are the pros passive on the leg action on the pitching shots? Like a bit of softness in the hands, a bit of feel. They're not looking to optimize energy or power in the swing, and that's why they'll start with a narrower stance. And as they make their swing, oftentimes we watch a good player hit a pitch. They go up to here, they'll literally drop their hands down very softly and then spin around the upper body against quite a static lower body. There's a lot more sort of range and motion in the upper body for those players when they pitch. So how do you start that downswing? Well, the legs have a little bit of flex, a bit of bounce in, a bit of Elvis in there for you, Neil. Love me tender. And a bit of softness there in the knees, but most of the activity is the softness of the hands and then this coiling of the body around. You watch a lot of good players chip and pitch like that. They sort of make quite an excessive turn with the body on the way through, just to pop the ball a short distance. And that's with that incredibly soft hands. Quite a few pros do really grip the club and squeeze the life out of it. And if you shake their hands whenever you meet sort of a playing pro, yeah, there's a lot of sort of machismo in there, a lot of machismo in there to sort of give the squeeze and the sort of strength in the hands, but they have to be strong for their job. And I think no one's a natural at this game, but if you do have a lot of physical strength in the hands, it's extremely helpful because you can use them lightly. Paradox, isn't it? There's so much power and strength and tightness in there available, but they use them lightly until they go into impact and they snap that right hand in. It's a very famous quote about Ben Hope in his book, on the return to the ball, I wish I had 3 right hands. He's built up all this power here. On the return to the ball, as he's unloading it, his body's moving out of the way, and that's when the right hand snaps into position. So going back to the sequence of the downswing, we haven't really talked much about how the hands work from this dimension here. We've talked a lot about the path, wedge path, driver path, but from this dimension here, creating that angle, return that angle to the ball, and that angle widens out down here. Now, it was very famous in the 80s and 90s, saying, you've got to delay the hit and create some lag here to get in this position. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing in physics which said the narrower that angle is there, and the later that angle is released, creates more power. The wider the arc, the bigger the smack. Now, yes, we can make an early release at the top of the swing here, where people throw the club and get themselves out of position, but that's typically because they squeeze the handle and mistimed the swing. Everybody's trying to release that angle. The timing of the swing is when it happens down here. So you can see if I try and make my swing look as elegant as possible, up, maintain the angle, and then widen it down here. None of this delaying action, because that slice will top the ball. The club hasn't released and got into it. And again, think of the baseballer. Bang, in that big position there. It'd be interesting to know what his arm look like at impact. I wonder how much leverage is still in the arms before he snaps that bat in. So in terms of the sequence of the downswing from here, big coil back, stamp, and then pull backwards. Hands are dropping softly, and then as the left leg is pulling backwards, that allows the arms to release that angle. If we look at the Hogan imagery again, of what that right arm should look like. One of the first pictures I downloaded. That's a fabulous set of images there for you. In the middle picture, we see more of a perfect 90-degree angle of the arm. On the finishing picture, he's thrown that arm out. But again, look at the leg action. So much leg action there. Alrighty. Are there any more questions about what we talked about there? We talked about the trail arm being close to the body. We talked about the path of the hands being different for the different clubs and what have you. We covered a bit of philosophy to start off with old Arnold. I think the Lexi Thomson pictures are fabulous, actually. There's a girl who is absolutely using her physical strength to get as much out of it as she can. And because she hasn't got as much physical strength as the men, where does she get all that power from? She just rips it. Now, going back even further now, one video I meant to show you. This is Glenna Collett from the Now, boy, oh boy, did she give it a stripe. You watch this here now. Look at that footwork. So I'll show you the swing again. Watch the footwork. Big stamp and a big spin. Let me see again in slow motion in a second. Stamp and spin. And I assure you, that is what all the world bombers are working on now. Stamping that club down and spinning around. So yes, the more activity we have in the legs, the better. Because that starts the sequence. Stamp, pull or post, and everything should fit into place as long as your hands are soft on the return to the ball. Alrighty, folks. Well, thanks ever so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. Any questions, send me an email or send me a WhatsApp. You all know my number, hopefully. 07974 403 289. Give me a shout, and hopefully, what's the date today? We'll be back on the golf course in about 2 weeks. Anyway, God bless you all. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're all okay, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Take care.